Sanitation crews are working hard to dispose of 6 months' worth of garbage from a community the size of Wahpeton or Valley City. The mountains of debris need to be moved before the spring thaw. Making a dent in the immense amount of debris being hauled out of the Ochekti-Sakoan protest camp is being hindered by the weather. All the garbage that was left behind is now frozen into massive chunks of junk. In a month, all this trash could become toxic.
Standing Rock Environmental Protection Agency and Dakota Sanitation are working together to try and avert what could be an environmental tragedy.
It's estimated it will take 250 trucks filled with litter like this to clear the camp.
So there's a lot of work to be done.
Each load that's dumped is inspected by the Morton County Sheriff's Department.
We are looking for, as I said, anything illegal, anything that might be used to, I guess, harm our officers during a protest.
Authorities are also searching through the piles for evidence they hope they don't find.
As bad as it sounds, we're looking for people that may have died and could be wrapped up in, a canvas or a tarp or a tent.
Cleaning up this mess is being made more difficult because of logistics.
Because the bridge is closed, they have to take the long way around, so it's adding time, haul time.
23 loads have been dumped at the Bismarck landfill since the cleanup started.
The front lines of the Dakota Access Pipeline fight have been a high-stress environment. It's asked long hours from our state law enforcement.
It's day 175. I have over 1,400 hours of just protest time.
John Mole is a deputy with the Morton County Sheriff's Office, and he's been on the front lines many times during the conflict. He's dealing with a different set of issues than he's used to.
The little razor wire frisbees getting thrown at you, the possibility of losing an eye.
Every time it seems the pipeline conflict is reaching a point of meaningful conclusion, something comes up.
It's frustrating, and my laughter isn't out of ha-ha, it's funny. It's either laugh or cry. I mean, it's frustrating.
But the efforts of the last 2 days show good faith by both sides.
Everybody's working together and collaborating together. And for us, it's all about just cleaning up the land and making sure that the stuff that is here doesn't end up in the river.
When the camp is doing some cleanup efforts, we need to respond to some of their good faith efforts and make sure that we're doing our part to show good faith.
Mole hopes it relieves some of the stress he, his fellow officers, and their families have been going through. We reached out to Standing Rock Chairman Dave Archambault about the barricade removal, but had not heard back from him at time of air.
Good evening. Authorities arrested dozens of Dakota Access Pipeline protesters today, including a former congressional candidate. Many of those who had abandoned the old camp in the floodplain moved to higher ground, which happens to belong to the company building the pipeline. Law enforcement converged on the new camp with Humvees and front-end loaders to push protesters back on Highway 1806. Bo Evans was at the new camp before police closed in.
Lift up on it a little bit. The new camp, with 7 teepee frames representing the 7 tribes, was erected on a hill Wednesday morning, a quarter-mile from the original Ochekti-Sakoan camp. A group of activists who said they wanted to establish a more peaceful and prayerful protest presence built the new dwelling.
We want to make it more spiritual. We want to make this a difference from the old Ochekti. We want to call this camp the Last Child Camp.
This group of activists say the idea for the camp came in a vision about 2 weeks ago. This new encampment didn't go unnoticed by law enforcement, who assembled a small force of vehicles and officers to raid it before more demonstrators could put down roots.
Then decided that we would move into the area and clear the protesters from that hill, at which point that was done on that private land.
Everyone needs to make it free to go back to the main camp, take your vehicles and all items with you.
This is just what Crazy Horse went through, when he took his last breath, but he fought to his last breath so that we can be who we are, live our lives the way it was intended by the Creator.
Before all the teepees were up, a convoy of Humvees and heavy equipment pushed protesters who gathered on Highway 1806 back to the entrance of the new protest camp.
And it's unfortunate that they decided to trespass on there, really forcing law enforcement into the situation of having to move into this area and clear them from the hill.
officers made their way up the hill to the camp and threatened to arrest the occupants for trespassing. 76 of the activists were taken into custody, including former Democratic congressional candidate Chase Iron Eyes. Reporting in Cannonball, Bo Evans, NBC North Dakota News. I am at the Oceti-Sakowin protest camp, and as you can see, things have changed. A little bit different conditions than when we were here last. The ice and snow has started to melt, and it is very deep. That is my whole entire shoe under the water. And I think it's even deeper in some places. Obviously, this is causing some issues for the cleanup efforts. The inside of one of the teepees, that's just, you know, there's water in there. You can't live there. So people have obviously been picking up in the clean camp. There's trash and debris everywhere. It looks a lot different. Obviously, there's a lot more open spaces. At certain points in time during the last 6 months of protests, it was just completely full of tents. There was barely any space. The roadways were clogged and congested.
That's what we're trying to do here.
You were supposed to ask if you could even come in, not tell us when.
Miscommunication seems to have played a role in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers being denied access to federal property by protesters. Members of the Oceti-Sakowin protest camp thought they would be negotiating the Corps' entrance. Representatives of the Corps seem to think that had already happened.
We know that you guys are doing a good job of starting the cleanup, but we know that the weather could change on us and force our hand and start flooding earlier. So we think there's a time frame.
The Corps continues to warn about the life-threatening potential of a spring flood.
We need a date where you agree, where we can trust your word, that you will not come and respond in such a fashion, and we need to know what that response is going to be.
Protesters believe they can handle the situation themselves.
Why would you think we wouldn't clean it up?
When the meeting ended around 1 p.m., protesters denied members of the Corps access to the camp. The message from the state remains the same. It's time to leave the Dakota Access protest camps.
First priority is the life, health, and safety of everyone in this camp as it relates to potential flooding. And the second is preventing an environmental disaster by getting this camp cleaned up as quickly as possible.
Camp cleanup continues as protesters and state contractors rush to get everything out of the camp before a potential flood. Some protesters are firm. They won't be leaving.
I have no fear. I'm living in the purest form I can. If there are people who want to harm me, then that's on them.
However, others were less sure of their decision, but still anguished as they cleaned out the camp.
There's obviously despair, you know, that's true. There's like a deep sadness, like this was beautiful, what was built here.
The 2 p.m. deadline remains firm from the Corps and the state. Bachmeyer says both will do everything in their power to help everyone who wants to leave the camp before the final hour by providing buses and setting up a safe zone just south of the camp.
Our goal is that everyone who wants to vacate the camps prior to 2 p.m. tomorrow has every resource available to do so.
All who remain are subject to arrest. Reporting in Cannonball, Bo Evans, NBC North Dakota News.
Eviction notices have been served at the Dakota Access protest camp after today's 2 p.m. deadline to vacate. Officers arrested 10 protesters outside the camp gates.
Dozens remain inside, but with a Bureau of Indian Affairs checkpoint to the south and a roadblock to the north, they're effectively cut off from supplies such as food and water. Protesters burned structures all day, calling it a sacred ceremony.
Now, after the deadline passed, a group of about 40 protesters gathered near the north entrance of the camp and said they won't be leaving anytime soon.
You know, a little scared of getting arrested and whatever consequences come from that, but I believe wholeheartedly in the movement here and I'm willing to risk that.
Protesters established the Oceti-Sakowin camp last April. The population grew to 10,000, and 10 months later, a small group of demonstrators who were ordered to vacate the property remain. Today's deadline to vacate or face arrest was set by the Army Corps of Engineers and Governor Burgum. Sarah Berlinger has more.
Fire and rain lingered in the air early Wednesday morning outside the Oceti-Sakowin protest camp. Protesters set fire to structures they considered sacred. At least half a dozen buildings went up in flames throughout the day. 2 people from the camp were taken by ambulance and treated for burns, a woman and a 12-year-old boy. Explosions also occurred while fires were burning, possibly caused by propane tanks. While the buildings burned, law enforcement attempted to negotiate with some protesters who indicated they wanted to be arrested peacefully.
We're not advancing on them. We're still trying to work through the process of encouraging the kind of arrestable ceremony to take place.
No consensus could be reached after hours of discussions.
We are a peaceful, prayerful encampment, and we will be in passive resistance.
At 4 p.m., police ended the stalemate and began making arrests.
You shall not commit robbery! You shall not destroy!
9 demonstrators were arrested. One protester claimed he was injured while being detained. Access to the camp is now closed. No one is allowed in, but people are still allowed to leave. For NBC North Dakota News, I'm Sarah Berlinger.
Governor Burgum and others say tomorrow at 9 a.m. cleanup efforts will resume at the camp, and they're giving protesters still one more chance to leave.
Monica, just a little bit after 4, what was a mostly peaceful day ended with law enforcement advancing on protesters. Now, just behind me is the north entrance to the Oceti-Sakowin camp, and law enforcement pushed protesters back about 100 yards before stopping. We were told that if we were in law enforcement's way, we would be arrested too, that we were not protected, even though we were not in the camp past the eviction date. Now, after that, law enforcement backed off. They backed off about 100 yards north of the gate, and the protesters returned to the gate. And just about 30 minutes ago, law enforcement retreated back beyond the barrier, and protesters returned to the camp. Now, before we go, I just want to show you a little bit of what the camp looks like right now, some live new video. As you can see, there are still plenty of structures here. And while there were some burned throughout the day, you can still see some of the smoke coming from different places and the ash around. There is still a lot of cleanup, and the latest word that I have from the governor's office is that it will start at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. But that could be subject to change with the governor's press conference along with Morton County Sheriff Kyle Kirkmeyer. We will have updates for you as the night continues. Mixed emotion as the deadline to leave camp loomed.
It comes down to it, then I'll let them arrest me.
My plan is to exit before 2 p.m.
Well, my plan is to stay here.
Protesters burned structures, they say for ceremonial purposes. While the land is owned by the federal government, some protesters say it belongs to Native Americans.
This trees are void, so this land is ours. By law, by right, by inherent right, this land is ours.
While not everyone is choosing to stay, they are working up until the deadline.
My mission here today is helping evacuate elders and children, and that's what I'm working on this morning.
It is just past 2 p.m. here at the Oceti-Sakowin camp. We are waiting to see who will stay in the camp after that and what police will do.
To simply leave while being a resistance camp in order to delegitimize what we're doing.
Law enforcement say they want to avoid conflict.
We don't want to come in here and arrest people, but we understand that there's going to be people that are not going to leave.
After 4 p.m., a brief confrontation between protesters and law enforcement took place, and 11 demonstrators were arrested.
Authorities say the Oceti-Sakowin camp has been completely cleared of protesters.
The Sanctuary for Dakota Access Pipeline activists was established 6 months ago. During the summer, the population of the tent city grew to between 5,000 and 10,000. Harsh winter weather thinned out some of the demonstrators. Then the Army Corps of Engineers set a deadline for February 22nd to evacuate the camp. Activists were encouraged by the Standing Rock Tribe and the state of North Dakota to leave by yesterday's deadline, but dozens decided to stay. Now, today, law enforcement officers forcibly removed them. Cliff Naylor reports.
An unstoppable force met immovable objects today. A convoy of more than 100 law enforcement vehicles, including Bearcat armored personnel carriers, 16 Humvees, and more than 200 policemen and National Guard soldiers, entered the Oceti-Sakowin camp.
The 4 middle Humvees, we're going to make contact with this group that's out in front of
the tallest building and see what they're going to do. Hopefully they just stay put and we can arrest them.
Lieutenant Tom Iverson of the North Dakota Highway Patrol said approximately 50 protesters refused to leave the camp yesterday. Today, they were arrested and escorted out.
That they're clearing each building, each structure, each tent to make sure that it's not occupied.
Advance basically to the outer perimeter of D1 and hold.
We didn't want this. This is not something that we wanted. We don't want to be down here having to remove people from this area, but unfortunately there's bad actors that force us into this position.
Iverson says law enforcement will now establish a presence at the camp and make sure there are no attempts to reoccupy it.
Sometimes things just need to come to an end.
Since August, more than 750 protesters have been arrested during demonstrations against the Dakota Access Pipeline. I'm Cliff Naylor, reporting for NBC North Dakota News.
Reclamation efforts are fast and furious now that the base for DAPL protest activity has been vacated. How long it will take is anybody's guess, but those associated with the project want it completed as soon as possible. Work crews are accelerating the removal of what remains of a once bustling community.
If we start falling behind, I'm going to try and get us more trucks so we can speed this up.
Logan Thompson is in charge of Prairie View Excavating's work crew at the camp. He's one of several contractors assigned cleanup duty.
Just basically try and get this site as garbage-free as possible, as fast as possible.
Load after load of trash is being trucked out as fast as front loaders can dump debris.
We want to ensure that we mitigate any trash, debris, waste, or anything else from ending up in the water and contaminating that water.
Workers came into the camp almost immediately on Thursday to start cleaning. They hope to be done as soon as Monday. The most significant challenge? The mud.
The mud has been killing us, absolutely. It's just, you can't get the trucks in and out fast, and that just slows things down.
Everything left here isn't being trashed.
The tribe is out there currently. Members of the tribe or their contractor are removing raw lumber and anything that is usable and taking it out and reusing it as they can.
Cleanup will continue through the weekend because while the water isn't rising yet, this area has always been a floodplain.
Well, even though the old protest camp isn't on tribal land, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe still has a vested interest in what remains there. While the site was occupied by protesters, culturally sensitive items were housed there. Alyssa Dickert tells us how work crews are cleaning up around those structures and artifacts that are sacred to Native Americans.
In the middle of mounds of garbage stand structures that are meaningful to the people who once camped here. Dr. Kelly Morgan is an archaeologist for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. She's photographing and searching for culturally sensitive items.
It's just really sad. Something was really beautiful, and this is the end result.
This camp appears to be filled with trash, but there are many culturally significant structures that were left behind that are going to be treated with respect.
When we went through, we were made aware that there are culturally significant items in there, and then we came across those items as we cleared through that, whether it would be sweat lodges or teepees, that we were to leave them intact.
This sweat lodge is one of the objects that won't be torn down and trashed. Cleanup crews are doing their part to steer clear of anything that needs to be preserved.
To make sure that we're not disturbing anything that is sacred and anything that the tribe wants back, we can help out get that done.
Dr. Morgan says if anything of cultural value is found, the tribe will make an effort to return it to its owner. Reporting for NBC North Dakota News, I'm Alyssa Dickert.
Well, the Dakota Access Pipeline has begun interstate service, pumping crude oil from the Bakken to Illinois. Energy Transfer Partners informed the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in April that it planned to be operational by Sunday. An ETP spokeswoman says the company was able to stick to that schedule. The construction of the nearly 1,200-mile, $4 billion pipeline resulted in massive protests